heard people, a couple interesting facts. One is 40% of us, according to a Pew poll, live in a household with a gun. Mm-hmm. So fair enough people. Gun owner or no?
Oh, yeah.
Gun owner, family, gun owners?
All.
When you hear people say that the only way that we're going to fix this is not differences with something called bump stocks or what have you, but is fundamentally going to be repealing the Second Amendment or meaningfully change it. Talk to me a little bit about the idea of should the Second Amendment be repealed in some way?
The arguments for restrictions on guns are always things that would do nothing to stop the attack that just happened. But, we have to do something. We have to do something. And that's why I think we need to be honest about what we're dealing with. And although I won't address the bigotry toward our founding fathers because I have too much respect for you, Carlos, we are not talking about race or religion. When we're talking about San Bernardino, the Pulse nightclub, Fort Hood, 9/11, Boston Marathon, the terrorists themselves are saying they're doing it because of their religion. They're shouting Allahu Akbar. I mean, these poor terrorists, they've got to be thinking, what do we have to do to be taken seriously? We're yelling Allahu Akbar, and they won't believe we're doing this out of religious impulse. So obviously that is a category of violence.
But what if people push back on you and they say, certainly there have been instances of that and where people have claimed that they're doing it in support of ISIS, and that was Pulse. But they say when we look at a variety of other places, including Stephen Paddock, at the moment.
Right, that's what I'm saying. There are the three categories.
So
there's mental illness. There are Muslims doing it out of ideology, and there are the urban areas, and that's what I'd say to you, to compare general overall crime rates or homicide rates for America. I don't know, there's not a high homicide rate in Vermont. There's not a high homicide rate in North Dakota. I mean, it's obviously in urban areas, partially because of drugs, but mostly because of family breakdown.
Actually, hang on one second. Jump in, Chief, and then Stephen.
But I have to argue, I mean, is it because of their ideology, their religion, or is it because of their mental illness? Because most Muslims that I know, and I know a lot of them, are disproportionately not engaged in any kind of violence, so disproportionately not engaged in any problems that they cause for the police department. And quite frankly, most of them are absolutely God-fearing, freedom-loving, and U.S.-loving Americans. And so my problem is when you add the marginalization of people, right, whether we marginalize people based on race or based on social economics or based on religion, or based on religion, what you do is that you start opening the doors for people to start thinking, I'm not valued, I'm not welcomed, and then you add mental illness to that, it's a recipe for disaster. So we you know how we have achieved the reductions in violence in this country as law enforcement? It's called community policing, engaging the community, building relationships. And I call it relational policing, treating people with respect and dignity, and not painting people with a broad brush, which is what you do far too often.
All right, let me bring in, I know everyone wants to jump in. Stephen Pinker, jump in.
On the numbers. When we talk about either terrorism or rampage shootings, we're talking about a tiny fraction of American violence or violence worldwide. I mean, these are people who game the system by committing flamboyant acts of violence precisely so that we will discuss it, even though every day in the United States there's an equivalent of a Las Vegas shooting. So most homicides are not neither rampage shootings nor terrorism. Another point about numbers is it's true that Vermont has a low rate of violence, not so much because it is rural, but because it's northern. If you look at plot the map of homicide in the United States, there's a huge north-south gradient, and states in the south like Alabama, Mississippi, Texas have sky-high rates of violence. Third point about numbers is that aside from 9/11, the majority of victims of terrorism in the United States haven't been victims of Muslim terrorists, but of right-wing terrorists.
That's not true.
That is true.
No, that's that idiotic Mother Jones study that counts every white male who kills someone as a right-wing terrorist.
No, this is using...
Welcome back. As we mentioned in the angle, some politicians are using the New York City terror attack to foment a totally false narrative about terrorism and immigration. To make matters worse, the media, they seem to have no problem advancing this storyline. For example, just hours after the attack, NBC News offered this headline: Muslim Americans again brace for backlash after New York attack. Their concern for the 8 dead victims is just positively overwhelming. The Associated Press posted a tweet this morning saying, quote, investigators seek motive after driver in a rented truck mowed down people on a bike path in New York City. Motive? He yelled Allahu Akbar after he carried out the attack and requested an ISIS flag in his hospital room. You don't need to be Columbo to figure that one out. Joining us for reaction here in Washington is Democratic strategist and adjunct professor David Goodfriend, And in New York is Ann Coulter, a nationally syndicated columnist. It's great to see both of you. Ann, let's start with you. I mean, the cries of Islamophobia. I mean, how long did it take, Ann? Maybe, I don't know, 15 minutes after the terror attacks in New York? It's like clockwork.
6 hours, NBC News, and a tweet, for those keeping count. No, the media is very, very predictable. The media is on the side of the Democrats, and the Democrats haven't been changing any minds recently. It's not like they have good ideas. They're bringing in ringers. They want this constant transformation of America so that they can win elections. In fact, it's come up just this week with the Virginia election, I think it was in the Washington Post, no, the New York Times, Democrats fretting that maybe all of the Hispanics that have moved into Virginia may not come out and vote for the Democrat against Gillespie. This is all about the vote for the Democrats. For the Republicans, the corrupt Republicans, it's all because their donors want the cheap labor. But don't imagine that Democrats are changing any minds here.